Good afternoon. Welcome to our panel today. The panel is on anti-Semitism on college campuses, challenges, strategies, and effects on student life. I'm Dr. Eileen Serlin, a fellow of Division 32 and Division 56. This proposal came after some shocking anti-Semitic events on college campuses recently, most notably in a psychology graduate program. The proposal was rejected by the Trauma Division of APA, and so we thank Division 32 for its hospitality and are showing it here today. The alarming rise in reported anti-Semitic incidents over the past few years, as reported by the Anti-Defamation League and several other organizations, has been especially situated on college campuses in the US and Canada and other countries as well. These issues and the way they're reported in the media can have major effects on student and Israeli students attending these colleges, as well as their parents, faculty, and staff. Today, we will be joined by two eminent scholars, Dr. Ted Kahn, who is the CEO and Chief Futurist and Learning Architect of Design Worlds for Learning. He will be speaking on anti-Semitism on college campuses, challenges, strategies, and effects on student life. He'll be joined by Dr. Asaf Romarovsky, the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East, who will be talking about BDS, boycott, divest, and sanctions, and the normalization of anti-Semitism. They will be joined by student voices also telling their story. Welcome, Drs. Kahn, Drs. Romarovsky. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Ted Kahn. I am giving a brief overview today about kind of the situation of anti-Semitism and anti-Zionism on college campuses. I am a psychologist, I am a learning scientist, et cetera, but I'm speaking today mostly as a college admission coach for high school students who are about to enter college. And many of our clients are Jewish, some Israeli as well. And so it's to talk about the context of what they're about to experience on American college campuses. Okay, let's go to next. So this is just a context of what's been going on, which most of you are probably familiar with. There's been a major rise in hate crimes in the United States that we've all seen. It's important to kind of look at the context of the percentage of those hate crimes that are religiously based. And in the report that the FBI issued last year, actually of over almost 1,600 religious-related incidents, 50% of them, 51% were anti-Semitic. The ADL last year also, or this year, documented that this is the highest set of incidences of anti-Semitism that it's had since it's been tracking this since 1979, and the increase is over 36%, even over a year before. And this is, a lot of it is harassment, including online, but these include also physical assaults and actual vandalism. And then what happened in February is that there was an announced by the far right and kind of white supremacy movement, a day of hate that was supposed to happen across the United States. Thank God it didn't actually come to pass in the way that they anticipated. But that prompted our current president of APA, Tim McBryant, to actually issue a statement condemning anti-Semitism. And that was an important move on behalf of the APA. And then we saw last month, or in May, that the U.S. finally started a national strategy to counter anti-Semitism that was sponsored by the White House, and it's a pretty substantial document. So I want to show you something briefly, just to give you some context. This comes out of UC Berkeley, which is my own alma mater. There is an anti-Semitism education initiative that's been on the campus thanks to Professor Ethan Katz and some other supporters for the last few years. And they've produced a training film that's now spread all over the country to try to give some people who don't really know what this is about some idea of why anti-Semitism is an issue and how it came to be. I'm not going to show the whole film now. I just want to show the first 2 or 3 minutes to give some context. So hopefully this will work. Let's go here.
Building an inclusive campus community requires an understanding of others and a recognition that certain behaviors are not acceptable. Attributing equality to a person just because they're a member of a certain ethnic or religious group is a form of discrimination. Anti-Semitism is discrimination against Jews. It is a perception, belief, or behavior toward Jews simply because they are Jewish. To understand anti-Semitism, let's first get clear on a few things. Judaism is ancient, over 3,500 years old. It's the first religion to embrace monotheism, the idea of a single God. The Jewish people is what we call the worldwide population that shares this common system of thought, beliefs, and behaviors, which originated millennia ago in the Fertile Crescent. In ancient times, Jews established a kingdom in what Jews called the land of Israel, with a holy temple in Jerusalem at its center. After the destruction of that temple and their expulsion from the land in 70 CE, many Jews continued to yearn for a return to this particular place. Jewish people do not all practice the same way. Throughout its history, Judaism has adapted to different times and places and become remarkably diverse. Some Jews are traditionally observant and carefully follow a set of historical laws that guide their daily life. Some Jews are not religiously observant at all, identifying as part of a culture. Jewish people do not all come from one place or look a certain way. There are Jews from all over the world, and Jews reflect the diversity of humankind. Now that we know about Judaism, let's talk about anti-Semitism.
Okay, I'm going to stop here. This just gives you, anyway, a little bit of context, the whole history of anti-Semitism and how it's come to be one of the oldest forms of hate that we know in the world, is documented in all kinds of places, and I highly recommend this film for the rest of it. So let's look at the situation on college campuses. This was a survey done of members of AE-Pi and AE-Phi, which are two Jewish sororities and fraternities done by the Louis D. Brandeis Center for Human Rights under the law back 2 years ago. And it was done on purpose because, as most of you remember, COVID had actually changed the nature of college learning for at least a year to two. So there was an awful lot more online learning. So the question was, is this still an issue? So I'm going to show you the results of this. The history of why they did this survey goes back to something that started in 2005 when the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights warned that campus anti-Semitism had become a serious problem. 2013, Pew Research Center surveyed Jews, showing that anti-Semitism is more prevalent amongst young adults. Then the Brandeis Center and Trinity College found that anti-Semitism was pervasive on college campuses, and this is now almost 10 years ago. And then especially 2021, despite COVID and an increase in online learning, anti-Semitism is still a major problem on college campuses. So here's the executive summary of the main things found from this survey. It's pervasive despite, the issues of COVID 2 years ago. Students are feeling unsafe. They're concerned about being verbally and physically attacked as Jews. And as a result, students are actively hiding their Jewish identity. This is the most probably important part of all of this, which is, if you are a Jewish or an Israeli student on a college campus and you don't feel that you either have the right or that you're afraid for your own safety and for your possible repercussions against you, either academically or otherwise, then you can't have the same kind of college education that other students have. I'm not saying these issues don't apply to other ethnic groups as well, including Muslims and Blacks and et cetera, but Jews especially, this is much more covert in some ways, and then it becomes overt and starts to actually affect their own college life. As just some examples that we've seen over the last year that have been all over the news, et cetera, UC Berkeley Law School last year ended up having a situation where a group of students within the law school declared that they would ban and not allow any Israeli or pro-Zionist speakers. The irony is that the dean of the law school, Erwin Chemerinsky, is in fact Jewish, is also pro-Zionist, and he would have been banned from speaking to his own student groups in his own law school. We've all heard probably about the situation with GWU Professor Laura Sheehy and her own treatment of some Jewish and Israeli students in her classes, which prompted a Title VI complaint filed with the U.S. Department of Education by Stand With Us for the violation of their rights. And we're going to see exactly what that plays back to in just a second. And then most recently, less than 3 months ago, the graduate commencement address at CUNY Law School highlighted repeated anti-Israel, anti-Zionism kinds of statements in front of the entire graduating class. And it prompted a congressman of New York to actually introduce legislation to cut off federal funds and grants for colleges that host anti-Semitic events. So something that Jewish students should know, but oftentimes don't know, is the protection granted to them under Title VI, which actually goes back to an executive order that our former president passed in 2019. So what it does is it clarifies that Title VI of the Civil Rights Act prohibits discrimination on the basis of race, color, and national origin in programs or activities that receive federal assistance. And that includes almost all universities in the United States, whether they're public or private. So what this order did was to clarify that in addition to the traditional groups that I think most Title VI people affiliate with, that Jewish students are a part of this exact same protection. And that has actually led to the legal actions against some universities, including what happened at GWU, because of this executive order. So what we really want to find out, and we're going to talk later to a Jewish student who actually was on a college campus, is what are they experiencing? And how can we find and use an effective education intervention strategies to combat this, not just anti-Semitism, but having an identity that's related to being in favor of Israel, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with some of the policies, et cetera. But in other words, to be able to express your identity as a part of free speech without repercussions. And so that's the context, and I appreciate opportunity to talk to you.
Thank you so much, Ted. It was a wonderful overview and very informative, and necessarily so. Thank you. Asaf, Dr. Omarovsky? You're muted. You're muted, yeah.
Sorry. Hear me now? Okay.
Yes.
It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the opportunity to be part of this panel and conversation. My name is Asaf Ramarowski. I'm the Executive Director of Scholars for Peace in the Middle East and the Association for Middle East Studies in Africa. We've been around for the past over 2 decades or so, and our organization mobilizes faculty to combat the boycott movement, BDS. And so I will just give a few observations as part of some of the points that we've been seeing over the past few years. As a way of context, I will say, just to add to Ted's point, I firmly believe, and our members believe as well, that anti-Zionism is synonymous to anti-Semitism. The debate in North America has been, and this is part of what you're seeing play out in many of these campuses, is trying to argue by those who would like to water down that definition as to say that their critical view of the state of Israel is legitimate criticism. And because I don't want to be seen as a racist, I'm only critical of Israel. Though if you test out how they are looking at all of this, and even individuals like Natan Sharansky would argue that that they are 100% anti-Semitic if you look at Sharansky's definition of his 3 Ds. Even Sharansky, when he was asked about when he crafted his 3 Ds regarding the delegitimization, double standard, and demonization of the state of Israel, had he had to craft out the definition today, it would be 100% worse. And what you're seeing, what he has been observing today, and what many of us observe at many college campuses, is indeed 100% anti-Semitic. But that has given a lot of room to go in different directions, and has caused also a great deal of brouhaha and controversy regarding to Ted's point about the adaptation of the White House's recent working plan regarding anti-Semitism as it relates to the adaptation of the IRA definition, which we fully support, and I think is something that should be supported. It gives the most comprehensive understanding of what anti-Semitism is today. Let me just share my screen here and try to show. If this works. Sorry, hold on. I have to refresh my page so it will like populate on share screen. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Mhm.
All right, so this is a classic image of what you're seeing on some campuses, which has been, this is not new as far as calling for divestiture, but what is really BDS all about, I think is a critical understanding to kind of define those terms in general. The B stands for the boycott, and it relates to breaking all relations with the state of Israel, and really that Israel deserves to be boycotted when it comes to consumer trade, academic boycotts, cultural. On that note, it should be clear to understand that what happens in the academy is not limited to the academy. This is a cultural problem as far as waging economic and cultural warfare on the state of Israel, and the fact that this is where that plays out. The divestiture relates to putting economic pressure on Israelis, as what we saw now. And to that point, there has been a recent list of companies have now divested from the state of Israel as well as the United Nations, including groups like Siemens and Mills Company, who are continuing to put pressure on the state of Israel. We saw there was a big controversy a few months back with Ben and Jerry's, and trying to put economic pressure and investment on the state of Israel to suffocate Israel and to punish Israel for how they perceive Israel to be treating the Palestinian population. These sanctions, as it relates to the S, are of course punitive actions taken by governments and organizations when it comes to trade penalties, bans, arms embargo, and cutting off all diplomatic relations with the sole goal of isolation of the state of Israel. That is the ultimate goal of BDS. I will also say that the concept of BDS at large, as we see it today, is not a new concept. This is something we've seen historically over the years, boycotting Jewish institutions and businesses that started. We saw it, as far back as recent history back in Nazi Germany. And so the tactic is not new. The pervasiveness of the tactic has grown over the years as a result of and amplified by social media and the sorts. But I would also point, historically speaking, that the tactic of BDS directly comes out of a PLO playbook. The PLO back in the 1960s, headed by Yasser Arafat and company, understood that they may not be able to defeat Israel militarily speaking, but they will be able to use what we call in the social sciences soft power, media and the academy. And so there's been a growth of the isolationism, or what I would call the Palestinianism of the American academy, where you've had professors and graduate students teaching based on a one-sided monolithic narrative. And so by the time BDS in its current formulation rolled around in 2005, and specifically 4 or 5 after the Durban conference in South Africa, they've already fed into what I would consider to be a pre-existing condition. And so by teaching based on this binary or black and white narrative of victim-victimizer mentality, and the idea that Jews are indeed the victimizers, Palestinians are the eternal victims, and that narrative has been hijacked in total by the academy. Adding to that, of course, is the financial incentive, where you start to see Arab country, Palestinian and Arab philanthropists buying chairs and departments with the idea that if you buy a chair or a department within these specific departments, you buy the politics in which these topics are being taught. I will also argue that what you're seeing, I am not only talking about specifically Middle East studies at large. What I am seeing today and what we've been observing at large relates to the humanities at large and the academy at large. It was true maybe 10, 15 years ago that we tried to argue correctly at the time that this is pervasive in the humanities, but in the STEM studies, usually 1 + 1 = 2. That is not true at all today. So really, the entire university is fertile ground for everything you're seeing today when it comes to boycott. And by the way, I will argue that, and I do, that there has not been a university out there today that is immune to BDS at large. There are levels, there are grades, there's not a cookie cutter model. but the entire lens in which to see the Arab-Israeli conflict, and BDS is a halo for the Arab-Israeli conflict, is used through this lens. This is another critical aspect as I look at these problems. It's not a Jewish problem, or an academic problem. There's an American political cultural issue, and these are indeed something that we see play out with what I would consider to be the religiosity of today as it relates to the debate about diversity, equity, and inclusion. Some of you may have heard of the recent Supreme Court decision regarding citing Harvard, where people are going to be starting to be looked at and accepted based on imagery rather than skill set. These are indeed cultural problems that we're seeing play out today in the United States. And to my mind, and it's true, the BDS is indeed an index of anti-Semitism and American tolerance. I do believe that the pendulum has swung extremely far. To Ted's point, that the TED stats, which I agree with, and even the ADL has cited that there has been a growth of close to 50% of blatant anti-Semitic activity in the United States at large, even before powwow and before Pittsburgh. I mean, these are things that we're seeing all over the place. You know, looking at New York and looking at other places around the country of what is being tolerated as far as Americans when it comes to anti-Semitism. To that point, this is where I consider the normalization of anti-Semitism in American society today, because racism, unfortunately, in the United States is only seen as one thing against the African-American community. And the challenge that the pro-Israel Jewish community has is proving is twofold. One, that Jews are minorities, and two, that anti-Semitism is racism. And this is kind of what you're seeing play out within this conversation. The trigger words or the use of intolerance in the name of justice is becoming an ongoing threat to American Jews in Israel and to free speech in America. There is free speech has become a religiosity on many college campuses, and there is a fear or an opposition to trying to say that when does free speech lead into hate speech, and to take actual serious measures and consequences for those kind of behaviors. What Ted referred to before, what happened at El Camino, what happened at CUNY, 100% should be defined as hate speech and should not be tolerated on any college campuses. You know, in a different constellation, campuses would not tolerate a David Duke coming to a college campus, but they tolerate similar voices when they are expressed against Jews and Israelis. And so I think that is something critical to understand as well. The economic cultural warfare that we've seen played out here has been used in many ways on social media. Scarlett Johansson, who happens to be Jewish, and it was a spokesman for the Israeli company SodaStream, it got a lot of flack about this commercial a few years back when this commercial was aired during the Super Bowl. And she stuck with SodaStream to her credit, but Oxfam, who represented her, wanted her out because of her Jewish background. But again, you have these imageries where what I would consider to be, or what is called pinkwashing, where of course Jews and Israelis are living a fruitful and a thriving life, while Palestinians are suffering, and they're tapping into this larger conversation, which is, again, let me be clear here. Facts don't matter and don't fit into this conversation at all. It's all about imagery. And this is what unfortunately has to be unpacked on social media all around. And this has become an extremely pervasive problem. One of the larger spokesmen for these issues and was now being sued in Germany is no other than former lead singer of Pink Floyd, Roger Waters, who has been airing at his concerts. This recent concert in Frankfurt was dressed in a neo-Nazi uniform, flying pigs with swastikas. All I'm saying, my point is here is that this is a cultural problem not limited to the academy, and but this is the kind of abuse of cultural icons who are using their role in order to endorse BDS. Waters in particular has transformed and taken the song of Pink Floyd, "The Wall," become a kind of a national anthem to the so-called occupation and the idea of what he calls ghettoization. So again, you have a growing use of Holocaust inversion into this debate, with the sole goal of arguing very plain and simple that Jews are worse than Nazis, Jews are Nazis, and invoking the terminology that indeed the 1975 UN resolution, Zionism is racism, even though it was repealed, is indeed true. It's one of the highest forms of anti-Semitism that you see play out as it relates to BDS at large, and there's been an invoking of that terminology throughout. Similar images that we've seen all around, again, that validate a lot of what you see out here in this regard. The use and abuse of the academy, and to my mind, where you've seen a great deal of abuse of the podium, where there has been a replacement of scholarship by advocacy is what you're seeing play out in the universities. And this is, to my mind, an abuse of power. It is antithetical to what the university should be and what it's not. The Western liberal university should be about the exchange of ideas, and you're allowed to voice, viewpoints from left, right, or center, not to indoctrinate students. Otherwise, what makes us different than Iran? And unfortunately, in many of these students, particular in classes related to the Middle East, there has been a lack of balance in their syllabi in the academy. And not to mention the fact that students have been forced to go to pro-Palestinian rallies, abuse of power as far as losing grades. There has been threats on faculty who have been voicing pro-Zionist opinions. One of our colleagues at Connecticut College a few years ago was attacked. There was another professor who was left, who was is openly gay and is the only pro-Zionist professor at a college, and she had a swastika spray painted on her car, a knife left on her door with comments. So it doesn't matter how progressive you think you are. If you are indeed supportive of the Zionist cause, you have to shed all your progressive values. You cannot be a Zionist and pro women's rights and pro LGBTQ rights. You cannot have both. They do not go hand in hand. And unfortunately, both students and faculty who believe in balance and understanding of looking at both sides of the issue, they are forced to choose, and unfortunately also forced to shed their Zionism in order to be rank and file members of these institutions. And we've seen it throughout the years, and I'm sure that our student friend here, Sabrina, will talk about what she's experienced. But we've seen it with individuals like Rose Rich, who was at UCLA when she was on the student council, and the kind of questioning that was asked of her. It's not uncommon, and she is not in the minority in that regard. It is actually extremely pervasive. And this is exactly what is happening on the majority of these campuses, and condoning and supporting that kind of acts of violence. All in all, I will say that the environment is extremely challenging, and the normalization of anti-Semitism on American college campuses and at large in American society is hurting our institutions. There should be a discourse, a free discourse of ideas. There should be an exchange of ideas, and for the betterment of American society. I look at what happened about 2-3 years ago at Harvard with the Crimson situation, where Harvard's official paper published an endorsement of BDS, and the outcry of alumni and about the fact that it's not acceptable, but the fact that that group of students who were on the editorial board of the Harvard Crimson believe that they had to come out with a statement supporting BDS is a lens into where American future leaders are coming from, and the fact that they have endorsed this and believe that they need to support this. And that's exactly what we're facing. I think that there's a lot that needs to be done, especially within faculty. We have an obligation to help our younger scholars stay in the academy, get positions, and we have an obligation to balance. I mean, I think that's more to my point. I'm not talking about the fact that you have to be, even if you're not overtly pro-Israel, but the fact that you have looking at facts. And BDS is counter to anything that is factual. And if you actually, want to learn about the region, you have to actually go to the region. You have to talk to people. You have to know the culture, the people, the language, in order to actually have a brief understanding and not try to assume or presume guilt without actually looking at the evidence on the ground. In fact, if you look historically speaking, the entire academic narrative and the academic world of the Palestinian people is because of what Israel did for the Palestinians. I mean, I think of that, again, missing from a debate, but the idea of trying to block off an entire swatch of history in order to blanketly boycott the state of Israel is academically and wrong on so many levels. And that's what you're seeing play out here today. I will say one more word. I know I've spoken a lot, and I'll just try to wrap it up. There is a variety of groups who have been supporting this, at large, and this is what you see. I will be very clear and very blunt about the fact that the entire BDS movement in the totality of North America is basically the Muslim Brotherhood of the United States that supports the Palestinian, the Muslim groups on American college campuses. These are a list of groups that you see play out there that have been involved in BDS and continue to grow their support because of what they perceive to be as, again, using words like justice and rights and whatnot to play into it. Again, facts don't matter in this conversation, but to the point of the Muslim Brotherhood, many of these groups have active terrorist groups. So there's a question about allowing for terrorists to come, actual terrorists, onto American college campuses, which have been happening throughout the past few decades. Again, clearly wrong, and something that the State Department and other of our national security agencies should be concerned about at large. The money is coming for BDS directly, in case anybody had any doubt, directly out of Ramallah. Inside Ramallah, there is a BDS National Committee, which kindly throughout this flow chart, which we don't have time to talk about today, is basically able to funnel the money into ensuring that the narrative is being captured, and that continues to happen till this very day. The impacts, as I said before, these are top 6 of impacts that play into American society and on college universities. And I think that there is a problem by the progressive narrative and the American left that has been adopting these issues, and there has to be some red lines about where they stand when it comes to anti-Semitism. But universities are key, since they are dominated by a lot of this narrative, and a lot of what you're seeing, by many departments and associations. Up now, on the docket is the association, the Anthropological Association, AAA, that has on its docket now a referendum to once again support BDS. These are things that are playing out, through academic associations, departments, and people are forced to choose. And that is indeed putting, the entire onus on making a left and right decision in these universities, and making the understanding of a right and wrong. Again, there is nothing here that's binary. We live in the gray, but the fact that we boil down the totality of the Arab-Israeli conflict to a right and wrong, black and white issue is an anathema to research, to scholarship, and to universities at large. So on that note, I will end, but I think that there's much more that needs to be understood when you're unpacking this. But it is clear that if we care about the well-being of the university, and if we care about the well-being of the academy, we owe it to ourselves and to our students to make sure that we give them enough information. We have a wonderful story to tell, specifically when it comes to the Arab-Israeli conflict. I'm not saying that we are perfect, but we need to know the story, warts and all. And I believe that if people actually know the facts and know the story, they will come to the right conclusions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Asaf. Let's go back to the main screen. Terrific. Thank you. Thank you very much. Also, I appreciate you both speaking very fast because of the time limits, but we will now have a copy of the video. We'll make it available to those who want to watch it again. And thanks, we've got it documented.
hold on one sec. So can we bring Sabrina in?
Yes, yes.
Good.
Now.
Okay.
Hi.
Hi. Okay. So one of the things when Asaf and I put together, this proposed panel in the first place that I felt was extremely important was to get student voice in this. I found this out directly from my alma mater because of what happened at Berkeley last year. And by the way, since Asaf was talking about the history of all this is not new. My wife and several other people at Berkeley founded the Israel Action Committee in the 1970s because these same issues were beginning to rise on college campuses after Black September and everything else was happening. So there's a whole long history. By the way, that's how I met my wife. So it's like 50 years or 45 years of these kinds of activities. So Sabrina, what I wanted to really ask you was to reflect on the results of the survey that the Brandeis Center did in your own experience at GWU and to just ask a couple of questions. So coming in to the university, how much was your own Jewish identity a part of what you wanted to have happen when you came as an undergraduate to GWU?
Yeah, sure. So I just want to say thank you so much for providing all that context. I think for people who will watch this, it provides a really great overview of like what's going on campuses and how really anti-Zionism, not, criticism of the Israeli government or whatever it is, but anti-Zionism specifically, which means the eradication of Israel and its Jewry, never comes from a good place. So I really hope that message gets out there because it's really important for people to understand, as well as the fact that anti-Zionism actually doesn't help the Palestinians. And I think that that's a fact that needs to be honed. And with that being said, like Asaf was presenting on BDS also doesn't help the Palestinians. And I can go into that, but it's not really the topic that we're going into. But I think that the more that people really understand that, especially like lay audiences, the more that we can tell our story better and really like have a pro-peace and like strong message. So I just wanted to present myself with that. But going back to the Brandeis Center survey, it's funny because I use that survey a lot in my work. And I think it's a really important one because when I came into GW, I was raised in an Israeli Jewish home, traditional, celebrating the holidays, not religious, but it was always a big part of who I am. And I kind of came into college thinking that I would obviously keep that, but it wasn't going to be everything. Like I was kind of looking for a more broad overview of like international affairs and anything that I really could learn to really see what I wanted to do. But when I came in, I didn't even know that all this stuff existed, like this whole anti-Israel thing, anti-Semitism. I was very unaware. So the first day of school in one of my classes, I said, hey, my name's Sabrina, and I one day maybe want to be a diplomat or an advocate for Israel. And I knew little that was one of the biggest mistakes I could have ever made, because from that moment on, I think, I'm not going to assume, like, don't quote me on this specifically, but the students, I think they were ignoring me on purpose because of what I was saying, and everything else that I said from that point on was looked down upon. And I was eventually labeled as racist, the conservative girl, eventually the most hated Jew on campus. Like I was just getting all these labels. And at one point there was a few incidents that happened here at GW. There was vandalism at the Hillel building, where there were posters wheat pasted that said Zionists F off and like settlers F off and all that kind of stuff. And there was a big protest outside that was pretty aggressive, I would say. And it was actually on Sukkot, which was the same day that they brought a former IDF intelligence officer to come speak in that building. But I mean, either way, whether they agree with it or not, it's absolutely unacceptable to commit that kind of an act, especially when it coincides with a religious holiday. But anyway, after that event, I wrote an article about it. I was very upset. And I started getting friends who were telling me that like the people who carried out that protest know you, they're very upset with the article you wrote, and you're the most hated Jew on campus. And I started getting a little scared because, like, I don't know, these people seem relentless. And, I'm a young girl walking around this campus. It's like a city here. So I was understandably afraid. And eventually everything was sorted out. And my physical safety was intact, which is, the goal. Like, I'm never going to stop really fighting and shedding the truth and protecting other Jewish students here. But I just wanted to make sure that going into this, if my physical safety is harmed, then I have to really take extra measures, right? Like reporting it to the police or whatnot. But I was okay, and I'm still okay doing more than I was doing before. But I have other students who are not so safe. One of my friends told me that one day he was walking through one of the main plazas here on campus, and he wears a big Jewish star around his neck. And the SJP group, which is, I'm pretty sure tied to BDS, if I'm not mistaken, they were holding a vigil after like some Palestinian terrorist attack. And my friend was walking across the plaza and they saw his Jewish star, and some of the students there spat on him. So when you talk about anti-Zionism or anti-Israel sentiment and anti-Semitism, you really start to wonder why a student who's simply wearing a Jewish star and not even connected to Israel, doesn't know about Israeli politics, is just simply Jewish and living in the United States trying to get an education, is being spat on while he's walking through the plaza. So that was another incident that happened. And there was other Holocaust denial incidents here on campus in the classroom, which are very concerning to me. And some faculty members who are challenged are not even receptive to learning more about the Holocaust. So it really comes from all angles. And I think what we have to realize is that there's like a horseshoe kind of effect here. You can have anti-Semitism on the far right and on the far left.
Yes.
And we have to call them both out. And no matter what political party you're a part of, you can be a Democrat or a Republican, extremes on both sides are never good. And although they will never meet, they will always look really similar. And we have to be really vigilant of that. And that's something that I always like to stress in my work, because a lot of people on the left, for example, are like, oh, the left is always good. They're always super tolerant, but it doesn't matter. Like when there's hate, there's hate. And that's really what it is. So.
That's fantastic. And just to wrap this up, Sabrina, what I want to know is, what would you feel would be of most help to you and other Jewish and Israeli students on college campuses right now, given both the situation and what you've known from your own personal experiences? So are there specific things? One of the things that I really like about what you were talking about, it has to do with the building of community support, because I think isolation on behalf of individual students who experience this, and also trauma, we've actually heard this and had a lot of discussions about this. This is not, mild. This can actually be as bad or worse than bullying that we all know has a definite effect on people. So what is it that you think, just in a real short order, would be of most help and support to you and other Jewish students now?
Yeah, sure. I'm really glad you asked that, because right now what I've established on GW's campus is actually a task force to combat anti-Semitism. And I'm very, very grateful that the university is actually allowing us to have such a platform. And it's really a group of 15 students, Jews and non-Jews, who are bonding together to make some changes at GW in terms of policy and really implementing restorative accountability, because I think that you can be punitive all you want, but I don't necessarily think that that approach is working. I think that it needs to really come from a standpoint of like goodwill, where students are really willing to teach the faculty and their fellow student body about Jewish identity. For example, what is Zionism? How does that connect to Jewish identity? So I think that's one major piece. And I think that more Jewish students have to be louder about that, whether it's in the advocacy space, like on the ground, or on social media. I do a lot of social media work as well, and I think that's really important. And I think more efforts like this task force that will actually create a report of anti-Semitic incidents to prove why these are problematic. And just like you said, they are equivalent and just as severe as any form of bullying for any other group, will really show why we need something like the IRA definition here to demonstrate to the administration that it's necessary to hold people accountable from the onset for their actions. So the issues like the Lara Sheehy case don't proliferate and get worse and really end up hurting everybody in the situation. Like Lara Sheehy herself even claims that her mental health was hurt. I'm sure it was, but if the school held her accountable before, then maybe that wouldn't have happened. And the students would have been safer and the university would have been safer from their liability now. So I think that once there's really an education and we come to it from good faith, there's a lot that can be done here. And, you know, if they resist that, then that says something on their part, not on ours. But just based on the interactions that I've had with administrators so far, they seem pretty receptive. So I'm pretty optimistic in that regard.
Oh, thank you. And as we say in Hebrew, kol hakavod, all the honor to
Todah.
you for all of your advocacy. Thank you all. Thank you, Eileen, and thank you, Asaf and Sabrina.
Thank you so
Ted.
much for having me, and thank you for all your work.